everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of TRAX, the official Avenged Sevenfold podcast with myself, Bees. Now, this is a bit of a different episode. We are a couple of weeks later than our usual once a month. Apologies for that, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But this particular special on Not Ready to Die, the song from Call of Duty, a real rarity in the back catalogue of Avenged Sevenfold, is actually going to be cut up into 2 parts next week. Make sure you're subscribed because you do not want to miss our usual TRAX treatment where Zaki, Sin and Johnny from the band are going to be joining Matt in talking all about Not Ready to Die, how the song came to be, why the game Call of Duty has a massive part in the Avenged Sevenfold backstory, and plenty more, including a tournament of Avenged Sevenfold versus some mums. I don't want to ruin the story. Make sure you subscribe. That's going to be coming on next week's side 2, part 2 of this Not Ready to Die special, because in this very episode you're going to be listening to my friend and yours, Mr. Matt Shadows from Avenged Sevenfold, and Mark Lamia. Now, Mark is the former studio head of Treyarch. He is, when it comes to all things Call of Duty, one of the founders who created and developed that franchise. We are going to be chatting things out, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. First up, another reason to make sure you subscribe. The next episode is going to be on Roman Sky from the stage, so get psyched about that. There is, of course, a 1-of-1 NFT artwork given away to one of our Deathbats Club Skulls holders. There will, of course, be a shirt available for a limited amount of time that is exclusively about Not Ready to Die. Keep it locked on a7xworld.com for that. Now, get ready for what is an incredibly inspiring chat with Matt Shadows from Avenged Sevenfold and Mark Lamia, who is the former studio head of Treyarch and, of course, one of the founders who created and developed the Call of Duty franchise. I can't quite sum up what a big deal this is to have these two together for one conversation. They're both so unassuming, so forgive me, I'm going to do the big plaudits. Mark Lamia has changed the way that we all interact with one another. Gaming and online gaming is such a massive way that we interact with one another, that we have a laugh with our friends, that we form friendships. It is so big what Mark has done with Call of Duty, and Matt Shadows, especially if you've got yourself a Deathbats Club NFT, you'll know that the future is his to write. So, with no further waffle from me, this is TRAX, the official Avenged Sevenfold podcast. I'll see you for part 2 next week, but for now, enjoy this exclusive chat with myself, Bees, Matt Shadows, and Mark Lamia. So, Matt, first up, before we swing over to Mr. Mark Lamia, I wanted to ask you, your favourite games and the games that you credit with making you a video game fan, before I ask Mark the same deal with music.
The games that made me a video game fan, first was Mario Brothers, getting the Nintendo under my Christmas tree from my wonderful grandma, who bought us all the cousins Nintendo, to our parents' dismay. So it was Mario Brothers. It came with Duck Hunt. I remember that at the time, but it was Mario Brothers. And then as I got older, I played the Mario series, and then it was Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat, going to the arcades, putting the old quarter up and having it out against all the best players in the neighborhood. I would go as far... Were
you super competitive about that as well, Matt?
I was, but I was young, and I was more just like enamored with the whole culture.
Yeah.
How I would go and I would take cans to the store, and I would recycle, and I'd get a couple quarters. I'd go over to the local bowling alley. I'd put them up, and I'd bring my Game Informer with me. I don't know what it was called. I forget what it was called at the time. And it would have a couple fatalities in it, a couple moves. And you'd have to go test your skills against these guys that were much older and more experienced. And you might get your head ripped off and, everyone's cheering and it's very degrading, but it made you better. And it was like this social thing where you'd go to the arcade and watch these people do these fatalities or fight with Guile versus Ken or whatever it was in Street Fighter. And it was like this culture, and it was really, really seedy and cool. Something that doesn't really happen nowadays. I always think about those arcades when I'd roll up there when my parents didn't want me there, and just the things that would go on there. It was very, very cool. And then I had a resurgence with 007, James Bond. We would play every weekend. We'd go over to Val's house. Her parents would kind of go out to dinner, and all of our friends would play James Bond and compete. And we'd all call each other screen watchers because at the time, you could see all 4 squares on the screen. And it was very maddening when people knew where you were. And then it was Halo during the Wake and the Fallen days. Where we would play. For the first time, we could kind of set up a LAN situation where someone would be in another room on a different TV and we would compete. And then I got heavy into Call of Duty when the Rev died, which is a little bit sadder, but it was a place where I could really be with my friends, didn't have to talk about the loss I had just taken. I didn't have to be out in public. And I immersed myself into Modern Warfare 2 at the time. And I became obsessed with my crew and my group of guys and became very competitive on a thing called game battles. And Call of Duty took over my life for many, many years after that.
That's fucking great. I can't wait to get into how this all blends together. Mark, I wanted to ask you the same thing, but with music, because Matt's told me in our conversations that you are a diehard when it comes to our culture and rock and metal. Who were your bands that got you into that kind of thing, and some of your favourite bands in terms of, I've heard you've seen Rush about 6,432 times.
Yeah, no, look, Rush is amazing, melodic yet complex, and just, I'll miss seeing them live. But, everything from classic rock to, the Beatles, The Who, Stones. But I was pretty much, in my youth, I was pretty much an 80s metalhead or hard rocker. So it was like Van Halen and GNR, and even more progressive stuff. Like, I was a huge Queensryche fan. I still am. Ozzy, Sabbath. It was like, Zeppelin, of course. And anyways, the list goes on and on. Matt and I have gone and seen a lot of concerts together, actually. Scorpions, AC/DC, Queensryche. And I was even in a metal band myself in college for just a little while.
What was the name of your band, Mark? We got to know this.
Red Rum.
Hell.
You could see us live on Del Playa, on any given weekend back in probably 1988 or 89 or something like that.
Shout out The Shining in room 237. Amazing. that's fucking great.
But I could never keep myself away from the vocals. So I got to do the stand-in on and do vocals for War Pigs, which, that was good.
Holy shit. So how did getting into making games come about? Because, obviously through our episodes on TRAX so far, we got how the Sevenfold lads were into sports and all these sorts of things, but then it came to being in a band. Getting into gaming, was there something that made you, as a younger man, kind of go, I want to do more than just play games? Was there a transitional moment like that?
Yeah, there was. It was me saying I didn't want to be a lawyer after going to law school for 3 years, and sitting in a library studying for the California bar exam instead of studying, which is unfortunately fairly common for me. I'm easily distracted, especially when I get bored. And I pick up this magazine called Computer Gaming World, which doesn't exist anymore. And on the cover of it is just this bitchin' Mech Warrior 2, just this mech coming out of bursting flames and stuff like that. And I remember picking up that magazine and just being so happy, because I played the original Mech Warrior back in college and it was one of my favorite games. And I was just so happy. And I was like, God, you know what? I'd been in computers. I actually worked at the computer lab at Santa Barbara. I'd I'd actually woven games into courses for political science, an upper division course. I was able to actually weave SimCity into a course for an instructor who was happy to have somebody who knew something about video games. I was like, yeah, it's a total simulation. Like, you plan it and stuff happens if you don't plan your cities right and everything. Anyway, so I was doing all this kind of stuff, right? And I went to law school and spent 3 years and studied for the bar exam. And I was just like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I really don't. But I'll be a lawyer if I have to. I'm not I want to make sure I can provide. And I did all that work and spent a ton of money at school and whatever. But anyway, so I go home. I'm like, to my wife, I'm like, I got it. I'm going to make video games. And she's just like, okay, I know you're upstairs playing Doom and Dark Forces and a bunch of other games back in the day. She's like, but you don't know anything about making games and you don't know how to program and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. I'll just go I'll figure it out. I want to be this happy every day. I want to be this happy every day. So I answered an ad from Activision, I guess it's about 27 years ago now. And they were looking for people with JDs or MBAs to help them produce games. And I was like, I just fell out of my chair. I was like, I didn't know anybody in the industry. I didn't know any lawyers for that matter. I was the first person to go to some kind of graduate school. And I was like, give me any job you've got. I don't really care. I'm just going to treat it as a learning experience. Like, I'm still going to school and I'm going to get this small stipend, because my friends were all getting, lawyer jobs and talking about the money they were going to make and how, all that. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll do all that later. And I just took an entry-level job burning CDs in 1995 with a law degree. It was the lowest job in production. We started something called the burn room, which is effectively the mail room for game development. And I just took the job because I was like, well, whatever, I don't really care. I'm going to learn. And that's exactly what I did. I just was there all the time, learning from people and just saying, what can I do, even to directors and producers that, were making games at the time. And I just say, hey, how can I help you? And they're just like, who's this guy who's kind of walking around? It was like, it was a guy who was, ridiculously in debt and freaked out that he just took an entry level job. And how the hell was I going to, even pay off my student loans, so to speak? But anyways, I was also just into it. It was super exciting. So that's it. I just took the job and fortunately the industry was small in 1995, much smaller, very small. And, we didn't know that it was going to grow into what it grew into, but I was fortunate enough to kind of grow with it and have opportunity and stuff like that.
I think that's such a massive lesson for anyone that's out there listening with any kind of dream, is you can just do it. It's not about thinking I'd like to do that. It's about actioning it and just deciding to put everything down and to knuckle down and to fly into something, especially if it's something that you can see enjoyment in and that you can believe in a future.
Yeah, especially if you're a young person without a ton of responsibilities, whether it's kids or a house or mortgage and stuff like that. It's like, if you have a passion and you want to kind of go for it, you'd be surprised. It's like you're going to kick ass at your passion. So whether it's music or games or sports or anything, podcasting, it doesn't matter what it is. It's like, if you're passionate about it, you're going to just do it a lot. And you're going to get better at it and you're going to enjoy it along the way. It's also important to know what you don't like. So it's okay. If you pick the wrong path, don't be paralyzed, man. That's as important as knowing where you want to go when you're young, is where you don't want to go or what you don't want to do.
Matt, I just want to ask you, before throwing back to the art of making games, when did you feel that gaming, because we spoke about it briefly in what you're going to hear on the next episode, but gaming, when all three of us were kids, was literally that. It was just seen as a medium for kids, and it just completely blasted that. And I know it's to do with the evolution of time and that kind of thing. But was there a period where you felt like gaming, actually for both of you this question, did you feel like there was a period where gaming stopped becoming that? Because now, video gaming is for everybody, be it Candy Crush for the elderly to like me running around on Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a perfect example of the culture dictates what's going to be acceptable, right? And I look around at 40 years old and all my friends still play video games. And that wasn't the case when I started. But you got to think these things came out in a mass production sort of way where you can get Nintendo at Toys R Us. And America was just blown away and enamored by this fact that you could have this at your house and do this. And then you think about the advancements where there was all of a sudden online, there was multiplayer, you could interact with people. Before all this, pre that, it was like unthinkable to think I can go talk to my friends. I mean, we're talking pre cell phones, pre any of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you can actually like, what if that, NPC was a real person? What if I was playing against a guy on the other side of the world? And then it became a reality. And when you have these very compelling, almost like AAA movie-esque stories and things that you can immerse yourself in, and you have this competitive aspect to it, and you have the action adventure aspect where you kind of take on a role of a character and you build your character up and you identify with them. All these different aspects, I think, touch deeply on a human level. And for people my age, we understood that and we accepted it. And that's why we never let it go. And it will never be let go again. My generation is the generation, or maybe the generation after mine, was a generation where competitive gaming and $1 million Fortnite players came into existence.
Yeah, man.
The industry keeps evolving into this thing where there's an emotional attachment to games. There's an emotional connection and connective tissue to how we all interact with each other through games and through storytelling. And it's just another very well done medium that I can't imagine ever going away. And to be fair, my parents never had that experience. They didn't get to experience Mario. They didn't get to experience Halo or Call of Duty. They didn't get to experience any of that. So they don't know, but I know, and I know that it's not going away. And I look around now and everyone I know that used to play games still plays games.
Yeah, it's funny. They don't have those kind of things. Like I remember how I spent seeing in the year 2000 on New Year's Eve was me and my mate playing a WrestleMania game endlessly until we beat The Undertaker. And the room went off like England had just won the World Cup when that 3 count finally came. And they don't have that kind of level of experience. So it's a really good point. I'd never kind of put 2 and 2 together in that manner. But like, Mark, you mentioned Doom as well, to kind of bring this into that, like both of those kind of cultures coming in. I remember games like that and Duke Nukem having real crossover into like imagery that works with metal and those kind of things. Did you feel when you were starting to develop games and things like that, being part of that culture, being in an 80s metal band, and I'm sure still like loving loads of rock music as you started working in Activision, did you feel that influence in your gaming? Because of course where we're going later on with Not Ready to Die and with Call of Duty is with zombies and that kind of thing. It's very like metal imagery. Did you feel those two worlds kind of coalescing during your time of developing games pre Call of Duty?
Yeah, I did. I mean, we had, I think from a pop culture perspective, I think it was when Tony Hawk hit and you had incredible soundtracks going into that game. And just the kind of music, everything from rock to punk to just, and Tony Hawk was one, in my opinion, one of the first sort of household name games, that one, and then Guitar Hero, and of course Call of Duty and Halo would become, and a number of other games as well. But Tony penetrated, pop culture in a way that, I think was incredible at the time. And I was there. I wasn't working on it. I knew the team that was working on it, and I was just like, that's amazing that's when it also struck me that like this thing is just getting so big now. It's no longer this enthusiast hobbyist industry that I started back in 1995. It was blossoming into something. So anyways, I was fortunate enough to, while, I was playing Doom before I got into the industry, I was fortunate enough also to work with the id development team that was working on Doom, but also Quake games. And, I remember E3 and a long time ago, because either Quake 1 or Quake 2, and Trent Reznor was there, and he's setting up the sound, and I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I saw the music as this being a platform for music, for artists, and it wasn't just about being coders or animators, for musicians, for sound designers, for storytellers. Along with Matt, it's like I think I was like the first generation of video gamers. Like I remember a time when there was no video games and I was a child, and then and then video games showed up, right? It was like, what's this thing, Pong? What's this thing, Space Invade? What, in the corner, what is that? My Atari, Intellivision, all that stuff, right? I kind of grew with it, but again, it was still enthusiast hobbyists. I think it's actually Matt's generation that around that time that I recognized. Look at me talking about you like you're like a youngster and I'm an old person. It's around Matt's generation. No, but it probably was, another 10 or 15 years later where it penetrated culture. And I think Matt nailed it. It's the social aspect of it that binds you together in a way that, because my favorite times growing up were playing multiplayer with my friends sitting next to me. Right? Like in the arcades, that was our multiplayer, right? Until, working on, internet games, whether it was the first MechWarrior 2, making that a net mech game, one of the first internet games, or playing Doom or Quake Online or Dark Forces or whatever it was I was playing at the time. Those social experiences made all the difference in the world for games. And I think it's growth. And as I always told people, I said, we're in a situation now where we're just getting more gamers. Like the gamers are growing up. It's a part of who they are. It's a part of their childhood that they can actually hang on to and have fun with. I'm seeing it cross-generationally. I'm seeing fathers play with their sons overseas, moms playing, my wife plays with my kids' video games. It's just like there's a generation now. We just keep adding to the arsenal of gamers. But when we say gaming, it's really all the arts, right? And that's what I love about it. It's beautiful art, beautiful animation, beautiful sound design, beautiful storytelling, amazing music, composition. It's all that coming together in a way that I don't think you get in any other medium.
Yeah, it's all encompassing, man. Like I was saying to someone recently, like the opening of movies are one thing, and you can get some really, like, I'm sure as you're listening out there, there'll be something that you think of like, oh, wow, the opening scene of a movie. But when you get the opportunity to do that with gaming and like play that opening thing, there's nothing like it. So I wanted to, you mentioned their friendships evolving due to gaming, which brings me to you guys. So how did you two come into each other's spheres of existence?
So first time I came into exposure with Avenged Sevenfold, and not quite Matt yet, was we would just release Black Ops 1, and my legal department calls me and says, hey, there's this unauthorized music video of Welcome to the Family that's being put to all the marketing videos. And we used to make these, we still do make these gameplay videos, and you make these gameplay videos and you put them out. Anyways, someone it was called Machinima at the time. I don't know if anyone out there remembers Machinima, but it was one of the first sort of gaming culture, video YouTube channels, so to speak. It doesn't exist any longer, at least not to my knowledge. Certainly not in the form it was. It was a juggernaut back then. Anyways, so they're like, we got to get this. These guys, I don't know what's going on, and I'm like, this song sounds great, but let me go, because they had just launched their album around the time that we had launched the Black Ops. It was like the fall, I think, of 2010, right, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, so I'm like, I pick up the phone. Like, I'm like, all right, just, let me, I know some people over there. Let me give them a call before this gets out of hand and everything. And I called them over there, and I'm just like, hey, you got to get permission for stuff like this. You can't just do this sort of thing. And they took it down, which was, nice. And then later on when I told Matt about it, he's like, dude, that's hilarious. Like, I had no idea that the Warner Music guys totally did that. And the Warner Music guys at the time were great. I mean, they were big Call of Duty fans too. And, it ended well.
Yeah,
I love it.
It was definitely Xavier. I think Xavier came to us and said, hey, we're doing I think we released Welcome to the Family before we released like a real single. And what we were doing was he came to us and said, "Hey, there's the new Call of Duty game. I know you guys are into it. I'm going to cut a music video to it and then put that out as like a pre-record sort of thing." And I had no clue that it was illegally done. but in my mind, it was like, oh, this is awesome. So
yeah.
we did it. And Xavier now works at FaZe Clan, and he probably works there because he's so good at doing these sorts of things. Like, even though he was, in the gray for sure, super cool that he did that. And so at the time I hadn't met Mark yet, but he was giving us cease and desist. So
hell of a way to make an impression, Mark.
Yeah, someone's got to do the job. So, anyways, I kept it out of the lawyers' offices. That was the important part. I took care of that, but it wasn't until our real first encounter was after we released Black Ops. The team was working like super hard on content. In particular, we were really investing in like the zombies stuff. We were really trying to nurture that part of the game, as well as we make multiplayer maps and things like that. And we had this really cool experience in development called Call of the Dead, and it was like this Hollywood-esque style tribute to the great George Romero. Who's, of course, the father of the zombies genre and someone who we owe so much of our inspiration to, really. So it had this, what was different about this was it had this really, had this fun cast of characters with Danny Trejo and Sarah Michelle Gellar and Robert Englund and Michael Rooker and George Romero, and they were all kind of playing themselves, right? So we were doing this. We were really investing in it. We had the talent. We were doing likenesses and voices and really making a big production out of this. And I remember our audio director, Brian Toohey, came to me and he's like, "Hey, why don't we get to complement this a really awesome hard rock or accomplished metal act?" To do this. And I love working with Brian Toohey on music. I mean, from having the Stones play in the middle of Black Ops when you're, doing whatever, and all the music that our audio team was creating I was super supportive and wanted to help them, make sure they could realize all that. So anyways, up until that point, we've been making our own sort of metal music, which is as Easter eggs, which was all done in-house, produced, written, composed, a lot of it by Kevin Sherwood and then other folks inside the audio team, all working super hard as a labor of love. And for them to go like, "Hey, we want to bring in somebody else. Can you find us somebody who's sort of a big name act?" And so I talked to our lawyers and our music licensing team, and I was just like, "Look, if you can find somebody who's a big name act, but they have to be like legit diehard Call of Duty fans, because they're going to have to get into the material. They're going to have to understand it. They're going to have to understand how it's being used. I want an original composition for the game, for this game mode that we launched with." And it was going to take a lot of time for whoever did it. Like, whoever was going to do it was going to have to sink a lot of time into it, and with us. And there was going to have to be all that going on. So the lawyer who I was working with and our music licensing team, she, in a former life, was a lawyer at Warner Music, who was, of course, their label at the time. And she threw out a few bands, and Avenged Sevenfold was clearly at the top. And I ran it past a few people, most importantly my audio team, and they were just like, "Fuck yeah, let's do this. This sounds awesome." And but you never know, right? You never know when you get together, whether there's going to be that connection creatively and otherwise. And I'm happy to report that it was really something. Matt came in, and he came in with some management and some folks from Warner's, good, all of them good folks. But Matt invested his time up front with us and I introduced him to the team and the people who were making the mode, and he was curious in all the best ways. He really wanted to understand the creative behind it, but also how we were doing it. He was just curious in a way that I think everyone should be, that I still was with my team, since they would quite frequently do things that would just completely blow me away, and I'd be like, "How'd you do that?" So he comes into the studio and he spends a lot of time with Brian Toohey, going deep on it, and Brian Toohey's our audio director. But you know, the audio design, the sound design is so important to the zombies mode in particular, in all gaming, but in that mode they were playing a huge hand, and we'd always put these Easter eggs out. So yeah, it was honestly, I mean, you know, Matt, it was like even after our first meeting, it was like sitting with an old friend who you just had so much in common with. And there was like this mutual respect between, you know, his artistry and what we were making. And he totally was genuinely interested into what we were doing. And it was, you know, kind of the rest was history with that.
That is so rad. And Matt, what was it like being on the other side of that? Because you love Call of Duty. It's like when we were talking earlier about the difference in games when they were just something that you would buy and play, like it's become an entire lifestyle for people. And Call of Duty was such a big part of your lifestyle at that time. How badly did you want this gig when it was up? And not for popular reasons, right? You'd had the experience of Chapter 4 being on Madden and seeing what it can do for exposure for the band. This was more than that because it was a labor of love. How badly did you want to be the band that was picked in that instance?
We wanted it bad because if you think about it, and we've still done this to this day, we've never done a original song for anything, whether it's a movie or a video game. Call of Duty was the first time that we broke our rule, where it was, you know, we're going to do an original song. Before, you could license the songs out. Cool, they're done. But we really want to focus on albums. We really want to keep our, you know, the pieces of work that we do really concise and like very obvious. These are the records. But with Call of Duty, there was something about being a super fan. And by super fan, I mean, I knew every alleyway, every nade over a building, every single damage point, every single gun, every single game battles night that I'd spent for the last, you know, 2 Call of Duties playing with my boys, which kind of replaced basketball in a way, right? Where that was my competitive thing. At night, I was going to play 6 hours of game battles, and it was going to be Black Ops. To be able to participate. And also we were playing zombies, right? And zombies is a long round. That's like the whole night is going to be taken up. You're going to play all night until somebody's Xbox crashes or you just have to give up. Yeah. And it was one of those things where I was so deeply ingrained in the culture of it that even like the start of the map, when it goes, I just wanted to do those. I was like, let us just do those bumpers. Like we want to do.
Which we did eventually, right?
Yeah, we did eventually. Yeah. To know the culture and to know that to be killing zombies horde after horde and understand what kind of music needs to happen with that. It's not a traditional song. It's not a song that can be just kind of put together and not seeing the visuals. Like this is a song that has to go places and has to drive you. It has to be adrenaline. It has to be all sorts of things. And so I felt like we were just the band to do it, right? Like I understand what this needs. This needs to be long because no one wants a song that you have to get to a certain level just to open the song up and hit the rocks. And no one wants to put a 3-minute song. You want 7 or 8 minutes of like madness, right? And so there was all these aspects that I thought that we probably understood better than anyone else. So yeah, we wanted it. We just wanted it now.
Yeah, I can so see the point of that as well. Because when you look at Not Ready to Die, actually, Mark, I'd like to ask you this. The thing that showed that there was just no bands that could have done this the way that you did was when you put Damned in there, the orchestration of that and putting it and incorporating it and making it Sevenfold. As long as you're mine. When you got that back, that must have been a kind of self high five of getting the right band at that point in time because it becomes undeniable.
Yeah, so yes is the short answer is yes. But you know, when you're bringing somebody into your creative, there's a ton of trust, right? And it was clear after that meeting that Matt and the team were just gonna, you know, they were gonna do what they needed to do. Then it was like what I would do for my team was like, what do you need? Like, can we get anything for you? Visuals or this, or how about he wanted a stem of the zombies theme that he of course wove into the track. So I just remember getting the track back. Like honestly, it was like they went away, they're professionals, they're awesome at what they do. They came back, and like Matt said, it's like, holy shit, what is this, like a 7.5 minute song? Like, it was epic. I was just like, and it has so many different parts. I didn't listen to it on my own. I brought it into Brian Tuohy's office, since him and his team had done so much work. And I just remember sitting there with Brian, and I think it was Kevin Sherwood and maybe Chris Cowell, I think. And these are all people who just love audio design, love music, and love metal. So it was all good. So we get this thing, and we're just totally blown away. It's like, it's hard, it's aggressive, it's epic, it's progressive. It's like, it was definitely made for our zombies mode. I mean, there's parts of that where you are just, I would put it on and I would just start slaying zombies, like, because I'm, music to slay zombies by. It was absolutely, and just the lyrics and like everything. It was just, we were completely blown away and, appreciative, and we were just like, wow, this is awesome.
There's always that outside, like you get the people at the label and you get the people that are like, yes, you got this big placement. Now make a song that we can use Call of Duty to put it on the radio and have this big push. And what we did is we just said, no, we're making a song that is like for killing zombies. Like, it's like art for art's sake. Like, you're not going to get that on the radio. You're not going to get a push out of it other than this is going to be a hardcore, like the hardcore zombie fans are going to love it. They're going to fall in love with it. The people that are playing the game, it's going to enhance the action that's happening already.
Yes.
And I'm glad we always kind of make those left turns and just go with our gut. And like, and if we weren't fans of it, I don't think we would have done that. We probably would have tried to make a radio song, or not a radio song, but something that could be a single. But I think when you're going for art's sake, it's like such a better result.
Yeah, it's the sevenfold way, man. It's literally what we found on TRAX is there's nothing that isn't done for artistic reasons. It's what I love about this. And like, I've got to be honest, like I'm inspired by creativity on any level. And so it's brilliant to hear Mark talk about Sevenfold's creativity working within Call of Duty. What I wanted to ask you, Matt, is you and Mark are like really good friends, and it's weird to say it with you sat here, Mark, but like Mark's like one of the most creative, like has done something that is so massive for our time as far as Call of Duty and what it's done for social interaction and all manner of shit, which is why when Mark suggests things for Sevenfold, you listen. Right. So how has Mark's influence found its way into Avenged Sevenfold? Because this was something that we spoke of briefly when we were putting this chat together.
It's funny because there's certain people in your life that you trust their opinion on any subject. Right. Yeah. And I actually trust a few people in my life on most all subjects. And I trust very few people on anything individually. So it's a kind of a, because I feel like they have like this macro view of the world and I think Mark is really good at putting the right pieces in place. And I think he's very good at observing. And then I've noticed that he speaks when he has something very good to say. Good's not the right word, but very, very important to say. And I respect him as a friend. We've used Mark as a mediator between band members at certain points.
I didn't know that part. Amazing.
Over lots of glasses of whiskey. And he's also been to our shows where he's watched the performances and he said, like, one time he was like, hey, I think you can go deeper into some of these eras. I think it's cool that you had the Nightmare era and do this and that. And it's more of a nuanced conversation than that, but just little pointers and observations that I think are important. And they're important. I don't know if he knows that I take it in, but I do. I've taken in a lot of stuff. I call him over things that you would never think has nothing to do with games or music. Right, Mark? Are you right? I've asked you for advice on things that...
It started off with calls about weapon balance in Call of Duty. Once he found his way into the studio, it was like a direct hotline into Call of Duty. Yeah. He's like, what was great was like, he's under NDA. So like, I'd be like, come on over and play. Like, it was great to have like, you know, come on over and play. I remember you were like one of the first people to play outside of our studio to play Black Ops 2 multiplayer. And like, it would go from those calls back in the day, and obviously now I'm retired.
I'd send you long emails about weapon balance.
It would be like, I'd be like, hey guys, here's some feedback. And you know what? They loved it because A, they knew he was legit, but B, it's like, honestly, early on, one of the difficult parts about game development is you're in your bubble. You don't, you know, you just want to make sure you're not smoking from your own stash when you think something is good. You need people to play it to get feedback. And there's not that many people who aren't part of the company or part of the publishing entity, whatever it is, right? Somebody who's outside who clearly wants a great game and doesn't give a shit. Like, they're just going to tell you what they think. Like, you know, and Matt, obviously he cares and says he doesn't give a shit, but if you know Matt, you also know he will just tell you what he thinks. What you see is what you get there. And for better and for worse sometimes. So anyways, yeah, it was, but now we talk about all manner of things, from the music business to the gaming business to what's going on with Deathbats to Web3 to, I mean, just you name it. I mean, he's a great friend. I feel he's one of my best friends. I'm very fortunate to have met him, and over the years, just, you know, I think us both being new fathers around the time that we were meeting each other was, you know, a bonding thing, and our families have got, you know, love each other and get together, and, you know, everything from Disneyland to holidays and whatever. It's just, you know, it's nice to know that when I am talking to him, he doesn't think it's all throwaway. So that's nice.
This is such a unique situation to have a conversation with the two of you. Mark, I just spoke about what I think Call of Duty has done. Matt, like, I think is in the process of changing how artists can work, how music can work, and the digital landscape. Like, this is a very unique situation to have two people that change shit on a, in my opinion, biblical level.
Well, can I just let me tell you about something that I think was something we bonded over, Matt, very early on. Was we were in charge of, and thank you for the compliments, but I had massively talented teams behind me making these games. My job was honestly to clear the decks, make sure they had what they need, make sure they're performing at the best level possible. Like, I really saw that as my job, and then also connecting the dots, and then occasionally bulldozing through whatever was in our way, which is important, especially as these things get bigger and bigger.
Of course.
But one of the things that I think we had in common was we always talk about our fans loved what we did last. Where's the line where you're honoring that, but that you're fulfilling what you want to do creatively? And I think when you're in that position, you have to be in that position to understand it, and you have to know. So at Treyarch, it was like we went from making Black Ops 1 to Black Ops 2, and if you were in those early Black Ops 2 greenlight meetings, they were like, yeah, so it's Cold War going from the 60s, and we're just going to maybe just, you know, do the 80s. And I'm like, yeah, and we're going to do the future, 2025, which is not even the future anymore. And half the stuff in there is, you know, go back and play the game, you'll see. But anyways, it was just, you know, knowing how we always would do something different. And I would talk to him about that. I was like, it was necessary. If you want to keep a team engaged or musicians engaged, they need to be able to exercise their creativity.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, you know, you're making stuff for people who love your stuff, who make it so that you can have a career and do what you do. So figuring out that line of like, how do you honor what you've brought to the table and why people love what you've made?
Yeah.
And how do you push it? And where's that line? And sometimes you throw out the line altogether, because it just has to. And sometimes, you know, you can see, you know, you're honoring your past, but yet you're giving people something new, right? And there's always this thing, it's like, oh, they just made what they made before. If you get too close, right? In gaming development, they say, oh, they just copy pasted it, which of course, anyone who's done any game development knows that even that doesn't work. But the point is you got to exercise creative muscles, and out of that, I think you can do it for a long time, and I think that it'll be the best stuff. I mean, you'll have stuff. I mean, there was no one better at it than the Beatles inside of a decade span. If you listen to their music and you're just like, how did they go from that album to this in, a couple of years? Like, wow. Like they literally, despite being the world's most popular band, did things that seem like popular bands should not be doing, right? Like completely changing their sound and the kind of music and everything they're doing. And you see that with the progression of Call of Duty games that we were changing, but I also saw it with Avenged Sevenfold and the albums that they were making, and how, clearly your DNA is in there, and that's important, but it does bring something new and fresh to the table always. And that was, I think it's hard to do, but that's what makes it fun if you're creating as well as being able to do that.
And I think that what is interesting about that and your friendship and bringing that together is the importance of having smart people around that will tell you when something isn't right. Because of both of your levels of success, there will be a lot of people that will be telling you what they think you want to hear. And the best thing that you can do as a creative is to tell people what you think of something. That feels like the kind of relationship that you guys have when it comes to you playing Mark Sevenfold things, or Mark, you having Matt beta test games. Like, is that a fair reflection of your friendship?
Sure. I mean, we're individuals, right? Like, one thing that I do in my life is I don't listen to criticism from people that haven't really done it, or I think there's a Kanye line, don't listen to people who haven't done it better than me, whatever it is.
Yeah,
but at the same time, I also curb the enthusiasm in a way. Like, if there's too much praise, I also don't let that get involved, right? Because there's a lot of cheerleaders in this world. There's a lot of people that are just going to tell you what you want to hear, and they want to be on good terms. When people bring ideas to me, because I don't want to be the friend that doesn't at least verbalize my concerns.
Yeah. It's your job. If you see an iceberg, it's your job to point and say iceberg to your friend.
And also cheer them on if they want to do it anyways. It's true. You have to kind of, and I feel like you want to be around people that are like that, because your friends aren't always right, but they will tell you their honest opinion, and maybe you can sway them, and maybe it causes a discussion. But if everyone says, yeah, you're right, there is no discussion. It's just, but you kind of want to, I like.
And there's no long nights around a fire debating stuff while you're drinking wine or whiskey, right? Yeah.
No, Mark, there is no free will. Yes, there is.
We're not having that debate.
My God, this podcast just became 4 hours long. So I've got my own thoughts on that as well, and we don't need this.
We're not going
Brian, it would be like Brian and Matt versus me on the free will discussion, and then I'd walk out of the room and show them my free will.
A trifecta of that right now is what the world does not need.
No. So but you want to be able to have deep, smart discussions with people about things that are important to them as well, right?
Of course.
Like, I remember talking to Mark about cryptocurrency years before he wanted to get involved.
Yeah.
Or even discuss it with me. I remember things that Mark was doing with Call of Duty that I would write these emails, and then it turned out they were right? And that you can refute stuff, but the idea is that you just want to be heard as a friend, and then you want to have these discussions, but you love people that you can be around that don't take offense to stuff like that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, 100%. You're only trying to help.
Challenged. Yeah, you want your ideas to be challenged, to really fortify what your ideas and what your worldview is.
And so in order to have that, you have to have trust. In a creative working relationship, if you can establish the trust, I would always talk with my team about this too. It's like, you want the criticism. You just want to make sure it's coming from the right place. If it's coming from the right place, you need to hear it. You may still, as Matt notes, you might still disagree or whatever, but you want it. Like, you need it. It's good. It's healthy.
Yeah, I agree. Myself and legendary bassist Johnny Christ had discussions about how we put together tracks. Like, I'm all for it. If someone's got something that can make my 9 a 10, I want to hear it. Like,
was that after he had his drinks?
Yeah, he was shit faced at the Hollywood Palladium at the time as well. Actually, sorry, Johnny, but you were.
I've been there before. I feel for him.
I can believe it. So I guess how I wanted to kind of wrap this up as we get to the end of this chat is, it feels like we're at a point in time where your two worlds are going to not smash into one another so much as, like, in my mind, like, hold hands and double clothesline the future. Does it feel like the world of music and gaming, when we're reaching where we're reaching with NFT culture and metaverse culture and where we're going in the future, developing games, it feels like it might be the role of bands as well now? Is that a future that I'm looking at and seeing clearly, or am I slightly off with that assessment? Because it feels like this is where the world's heading.
Can I tee you up here, Mark? I know
Sure.
you're. The thing about the utopian future of creators create everything and this and that, Mark has told me over and over, it's hard to make games, and it's hard to make great games. And that's really what, it doesn't matter if you have a cryptocurrency attached or an NFT or what kind of beautiful, like, DAO system you have set up or governance or this or that. You need those people that are extremely talented to create great games. I'll leave it at that, Mark. Go ahead. And I know you have opinions on this.
No, you did. What Matt said is what I say. It's like when people say, like, oh, God, Call of Duty, and, like, you made it. And it's like, the first thing I'll say is, like, yeah, you know what? I worked on it and I helped. But there was, like, hundreds of, now there's thousands, but hundreds of people who are super talented and super committed. And whenever Matt and I would look at something, it would always be like, okay, just show me the team. Like, I want to go straight to the team. Like, I'm down with the concept, or maybe the concept's okay, or we can make it great. I'm not saying concepts aren't important. They are, but it's like, it's all about execution. It's all about the team. It's literally how zombies came about, through their passion and and everything else. I think it's important to note that Matt is a game developer.
Yeah.
He made and directed. He was the creative director, writer, art director on their mobile game that they made, which, I remember him going off and doing, he's like, I'm going to make a game. And I'm like, okay, say goodbye to whatever else you were doing at the time. And he's just like, well, I could, and because he had a bunch of sweet, awesome ideas, right? But then, like, somebody's coding them and designing them and this, and it's not, I won't talk for Matt, but I would talk to him on the same weekends and late nights that I was, doing my gig back in the day. He was suddenly doing game development work and real game development work. And they released a game that I know he put a ton of time into. I do think that you're going to see a lot more musicians try to, figure out how to enter this realm. But the way Matt did it was as a game developer. Like, I mean, I know we worked together as musicians, but when he did the thing, he wasn't like, oh, here's my music for the game, and here's my Deathbat art and some of the sketches of things that I thought about, and let the guy go do it and give him feedback and just executive produced it. No, that would be a lot of work and is important. But he decided he was going to do that and be the creative director on the project, which means every sprite, every pixel, every level, every sound effect went through him. And that is an insane level of commitment that I do not believe most musicians will want to or even have the experience or the skills to do it, unless they want to invest their time. I think they can. It's just a huge time investment. And so Matt parlayed all this work that he'd done playing games work, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And then he got down to the quite a bit different business of making them. It's like, yes, at the end you get to play them, and along the way you do play test them, but you're mostly finding bugs and things like this. It's a lot of work, and he brought that experience to the table. Was happy, and he put the time in, and he learned, and he's a developer.
Yeah. And Matt, just to close up on games and music, I totally take what Mark's just said and completely agree with it, in that I think there's sometimes bands like have an idea of like, oh, we'll do a game or we'll do a whatever, and it's just kind of like just to tick a box, rather than like the Sevenfold way, which is if we're going to do something, it has to be of a high standard.
High standard's one word, but I think it's just got to be passion. It's got to be passion, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's going to be a 10 out of 10. Doesn't mean anything other than, if you want to do it and you want to represent yourself or your art in a way, then you have to be there every step of the way. You can't have somebody doing level design and someone doing art that isn't immersed in your culture. The same way Mark wouldn't let, some random band waltz into Call of Duty and just put a song in there. Yeah. Every single aspect has to be dealt with on a level that, like it's like it's your baby, and everything from our game, our mobile game, which was an incredible learning experience. But one thing that it taught me is that now that we're in Web3, everyone that promises games, I know most of it's bullshit because it's really hard. And so, and then everything from that to Deathbats Club, right? Where you spend a year cutting your teeth, learning about these things. And then you start seeing an avenue, and you start seeing holes in the equation. You try to fill those, and you try to fill in the gaps and make it the best it can be. Does that mean that we know every great idea or what's coming around every corner? No, but we do know that we want to keep things as personal and as close to our hearts as possible if it's going to represent us.
I gotta say, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this as much as I've enjoyed this conversation, because it's so cool to just hear what is important about creating on a show that is about the music that has been created by Avenged Sevenfold. There are so many lines and avenues for creativity, and it's been so rad to spend an hour having this conversation with the two of you. Mark, especially, thank you so much for your time. I know you don't do much in the way of chatting and interviews, so it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. And Matt, I'll see you on the next episode, where we start discussing all things specifically Not Ready to Die. I'm not ready to die. That is it for part one of our Not Ready to Die special here on TRAX. Thanks again to Mark Lamia for joining us. Of course, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. New details are all out there. Go and check it out. But thanks again to Mark for joining us. Matt, Sin, Johnny, Zaki, all going to be back on part two of our Not Ready to Die special. So make sure you subscribe for that. And of course, another reason to subscribe is that episode 4 is going to be on Roman Sky from the stage. Go to a7xworld.com. Go and get the Not Ready to Die t-shirt. It's only going to be available for a very short period of time. And of course, the one-of-one NFT going to be being given away. If you are a Deathbats Club holder, go and check out the DBC Discord, and there will be more details about that. I will see you next week. I've been Bees. This has been TRAX, the official Avenged Sevenfold podcast. See you next week.
Menendez! What the fuck are you doing? Practicing so hard. Oh. Hey, goddammit! Our fans are expecting a killer show tonight, so do not fuck this up. Está bien, señor.